Okay, hi, my name's Rich, and I'm going to be discussing exercise prescriptions today. Um, for this prescription, it's going to be for a resistance training program focused on hypertrophy, strength, and power, and it's going to be under a 6-week program. Here is basically like the timeline for this class. First, going to discuss who the program is developed for. Going to talk about specific and measurable goals for the program, the pre, mid, and post measurements that will be taken before the program with the client, and post measurements so that way that client can see those results. Going to discuss overload and overtraining, and then a periodization training, which will include the specified prescriptions of hypertrophy, strength, and power programming. And then I'll go on to discuss different exercise techniques such as incorporating isometric, concentric, and eccentric contraction exercises. Then I'll give an example of those. We'll look at the sacromere or the sarcomere, excuse me, and look at cross bridging and how that can help with eccentric contractions. Then we'll go on to look at examples of bilateral, unilateral exercises and multi-joint exercises. Okay, this program that I've made is developed for individuals that do not exercise regularly, and they probably have limited information and knowledge on and experience with resistance training. So this program will be great for getting someone who has no experience, especially when you see the week 1 and 2 exercises. It's going to be using body weight and resistance bands. It's also good for people that just don't know where or how to start because they're beginners. Also, ideally, it would be someone that has a BMI that's borderline on the overweight scale, but not actually reaching the overweight, because this isn't for losing weight, this resistance program. This is for gaining ultimately strength all around. Just not, although we're working on hypertrophy and power, we're really just trying to gain more strength within the client. And that's about it. We're just gonna, and the reason I have this program for hypertrophy, strength, and power is it's over a 6-week long period. So that way, if the client decides that they like hypertrophy, strength, or power exercises more, then after that 6-week program, we can focus more on any of those individual exercise techniques. For specific and measurable goals, we're entering the resistance programming, like I already said, focusing on hypertrophy, strength, and power, and that's so the client can learn all aspects of resistance training and also find out what they like the best. As they progress through the program, what I'll be doing is measuring like their dumbbell weight and resistance weight, especially within the first couple of weeks, but also all throughout the weeks, to assess and see how they're performing and how much more they can do. Because we want to make sure that they can handle the weight and they can handle any type of resistance, even if it's their own body weight. For instance, we could use tapering where they go to their knees. That way, if they can't handle their own body weight, we can, and as the coach, you can even give them assistance. For instance, if they were going on doing a chin up, we could help hold their feet in order to help them get up because they don't have the strength in order to do a full chin up, for example. Before starting the program, though, what I would do is do a skin fold test just to get their body fat percentage, and record that at the beginning of the program before starting anything, and then at the end of the program, recording it again just to show them if there is any. Once again, this we're not doing a lot of aerobic training, although the first 2 weeks will involve some aerobic-like training or more aerobic training. So we could see some weight loss there, but also because we're in a strength program, likely they will decrease their body fat percentage, and it would be great to show the client at the end of that 6 weeks, like, this is how you've improved in body composition. Because if you can show, and obviously they can see that in the mirror too, but if you can show them data on it, something that's recorded, that would be good as well. The program is, the way I've designed it is from week 1 to 2 is like, kind of like the beginning stages where you're assessing the client and all, but by week 6 they're becoming a more intermediate to advanced user or client or trainer. They're starting to learn more of the multi-joint exercises and all that. And that's why at the beginning we're going to start off, crawl before you can walk. We start off with body weight and doing simple exercises and using resistance bands, because resistance bands don't keep the same weight continuously throughout the whole exercise. It actually flexes, and we have variation within the resistance, which will be good because then we can assess how much they can actually lift. And we want to make sure that it's not a situation where they're getting into too much weight. We want to make sure that the weight is good enough for them. We want to make sure that their performance and their form, I'm also going to be assessing their form to make sure that they're conducting the movements correctly so they don't hurt themselves. So for a pre-measurement, body fat percentage will be recorded, like I said, and then at the end of the 6 weeks. And then also the same thing with weight and resistance band, just recording the weight and the resistance that you're using. And then if they decide to go on another 6-week program, that would be great, because once we go through the 3 phases, which are hypertrophy, strength, and power, we can show the client how they're progressing through their weight and how they're increasing in their own individual strength. 2 concepts to know just for the client, which would be good for them to know, that way they understand the whole purpose of resistance training is overload, which is under the overload principle. It's pushing the muscle fibers beyond what the muscle fibers are accustomed to. And the reason that we're pushing those muscle fibers beyond what they're accustomed to is because we want the muscles to adapt. That way they gain strength and they become larger, because usually that's what people are looking for in a resistance program. Now, overtraining, we want to make sure that the client is not being overtrained, meaning that their muscles are being overworked and that work is exceeding the rate of recovery and adaptation. So if everything is overworked and it's exceeding the rate, their period of recovery and adaptation for the muscle fibers, there's a great possibility that they're actually going to reduce their strength and muscle size. So it's going to be counterproductive at that point. So we want to make sure that we're keeping them on the right track. And that's why that's why I'm going to keep it on a 3 days a week program, especially during the beginning. And if they become more motivated towards, let's say the 4th week or whatever, then I can add 4 days to the week and add like 2 lower body sessions. And what I did is I just did it really easy. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are going to be the workout days, and on Mondays work out upper body muscle groups. Wednesday, pretty much just full lower body workout, and then on Fridays more upper body, because there's a lot on the upper body that has to be focused on, like, of course, the chest, traps, you have your shoulders, and then you have your biceps, triceps, and in the lower body we have the quads, and we have the calves, and we also have the hamstrings. But there's many exercises that work a lot of those muscles at the same time. But for Monday and Friday, I use the upper body because between the rest of the days of the week, there's plenty of time for recovery. So this way, we can also limit DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, so that way the client also doesn't get discouraged from being sore. So the concept that I'm going to use is periodization training, which was by Brown and Greenwood. I'm going to use this training because I really like the training. I've incorporated it myself, and I think it's a great way to do things. Now, during phase 1 is the hypertrophy phase, which is low intensity, high volume. So during low intensity, what we're going to do is we're going to decrease the 1 rep max. And during the high volume, we're going to increase our sets, increase our repetitions. As we can see here, under phase 1 hypertrophy, we're going to have 3 to 6 sets and 10 to 20 repetitions. And then, as you can see, as we move to phase 2 to strength, we're going to have higher intensity, moderate volume. So we're going to have 3 to 5 sets, although we're going to lower our repetitions, but we're going to increase our 1 rep max. During the last phase, which was phase 3, known as power, we're going to still remain at high intensity, but we're going to decrease our volume. So this is during the power phase. This is where we're really going to get into increased weight, and this is why during phase 1 we're assessing the client to make sure that they're going to be able to handle the strength phase, and in the strength phase they're going to be able to handle the power phase. And this phase right here is what I would think is going to be the most dangerous. So assessing the client the whole time to make sure they can handle the weight is going to be ideal, because in phase 1 we're going to use body weight and resistance bands. Phase 2 we're going to move pretty much purely to dumbbells, and then in phase 3 we're going to use dumbbells all the time, and then even barbells in order to do deadlifts and like more advanced dynamic moves such as the clean and jerk, which is also a increased multi-joint exercise. Now, during phase 1, it's a great way to determine someone's fitness level. It's known as a progression level, and it also includes plyometric drills. So this means moving around, like jumping, while also conducting resistance training type drills. So it's a great way to assess where the client is at on a physical level. During phase 2, we're going to focus more on multi-joint movements, but we're going to focus on doing those before we do the single joint. The only reason we're going to do this, although it's more important to do what the target muscle is, at this point the client isn't that familiar with resistance training, so we're just going to keep it as doing multi-joints and then to single joint. That way they don't get discouraged, and it's better to keep them on track. And then later on they'll have the aesthetic reason for why they want to increase another, like perhaps they want bigger biceps, so then we can start targeting biceps later on if that's what they want. During phase 3, this is where we're really going to the peak performance. Like I said, this is going to be I think personally the most dangerous level, and we want to be able to assess them to make sure that they're obviously not overloading themselves and that they're always keeping the correct form, because that's where form is definitely going to get compromised. Now I've decreased this, and this is what I personally think it should be. So I just took Brown and Greenwald's recommendations, and I decreased a little bit because I think this would be more opportune for a beginner. So about 3 sets. I kept everything as 3 sets because I think as a beginner trainer you should stay around 3 sets, and then I just moved it. I put it between here to 15 repetitions for phase 1 and about 60% of the 1 rep max. To phase 2, I still 3 sets, 8 repetitions, because I think 8 repetitions is pretty decent. And then I didn't go to 90 1 rep max percentage. I just put it at 80 because I think that's a little bit more ideal. And then for the power phase, I went ahead and increased it to 90, but I kept the reps the same because the client may only be able to do 2. They may only be able to do 1 repetition. If that's the case, then we need a lower weight and reassess the situation.